So I just got done with turn number 16, and not a lot of good news for the Axis on this turn. Although, if you look at a couple of the battles a little closer, they aren't as bad as, they weren't as disastrous as they first seem. So over here on the Russian front, the Russians continue to push the Germans almost completely out. I believe the Germans own just one Russian territory right now. But the issue is the Germans got a bunch of stuff coming up here from East Germany and Poland. So they've got altogether probably about 15 mechs, 3 medium armor, about 10 self-propelled artillery. They got a stack of about 10 fighters there. They got a couple more medium armors, about 5 Stukas, and 2 more fighters down in Romania. So even though the Russians on this turn will probably take out this last territory that's currently occupied by the Germans and maybe even push into Poland, the Germans are going to group everything together here and launch an attack on turn number 17 if the game does go that long. So, and most of what Russia has is just men. They do have some mechanized and some artillery, but not a lot of offensive punch. So the Russians might temporarily take everything back here on turn number 17 coming up. But after that, I think the Germans will be able to push back into Russia, depending on if the game goes that long. The Germans also brought some subs down. They split off more of their subs, and they're now convoying 2 more British lines. So the British are losing a bunch of money each turn to the German U-boats. And again, something that's different from Global 39 that I was kind of getting confused again. These U.S. destroyers can't just come over and attack the subs. They've got to have an aircraft on maritime patrol, I believe, unless you guys can let me know if I'm reading that rule incorrectly. But I even with destroyers, they alone, I don't think can get subs. Spot and engage subs, I think there has to be an aircraft that's on maritime patrol in terms of responding to the U-boats that are convoying. So if that's the case, the Allies currently have no aircraft on maritime patrol and don't really have the aircraft to put on maritime patrol at this point. So the Germans might be convoying these British sea lanes for several turns to come. The Germans also moved that stack of infantry 1 step closer to Paris, so on this next turn they will be in Paris and then can react to any possible landing in France at all. Besides that, not much else for the Germans. The Russians, they built more mechs. They built 3 new heavy armor. And again, they're going to start pushing here into maybe German-occupied Poland, but I think it's only going to be a temporary thing. As far as the British go, they don't have a lot of money each turn. They don't have a lot even in terms of territory, let alone getting convoyed. So they're only spending about $15 a turn right now. The U.S. head came and we're in Tripolitania. The British force that had landed in Corsica and Sardinia, they could have landed somewhere else, but they were only going to have 4 infantry, so they would have probably gotten pushed out pretty much anywhere they would have landed in Italy or Southeast Europe here in the Balkans. So instead, they came over and they landed in Tripolitania, backed up the U.S. forces that were there. They landed all 5 or 6 fighters that are there that were in Gibraltar. They landed in Tripolitania as well, and that turned out to be a good move because the Italians did attack this, and we'll get into that battle here in a few minutes. And if the British hadn't backed that up, the U.S. definitely would have been wiped out there. Besides that, the British Air Force that was in Central Africa is moving up another couple of spaces as far as they could. The armor they had put down the turn before moved up a couple spaces, and that was about it for the British. The Americans, they did survive this battle in Tripolitania. So a couple of their tanks came over, took Cyrenaica, took out the last Italian complex that was in Africa. So as you can see, the Italians have absolutely no units left in Africa at all. So what Italy did was they'd sent, I believe there were 4 infantry, 3 medium armor, and a motorized infantry. They sent them into Tripolitania along with their entire air force that flew over from the Italian mainland. What they were trying to do is obviously take out these, especially the American and British ground units were really their priority, even over the British fighters, just because if they could take out all those land units, then the Americans and the British wouldn't be able to take back these territories in North Africa. Planes obviously cannot capture territory by themselves, so only ground units can. But the Italians had some really bad rolls. They lost all their ground units. They had to retreat what was left of their air force, which wasn't much. They were down to just 2 tacticals. So they lost like 8 fighters, 3 or 4 tacticals, and all their ground units. They did get through the 4 British infantry, 3 U.S. Artillery, 5 U.S. infantry, and 1 of the U.S. tanks. So on the surface, doesn't seem like a great move. They sacrificed almost their entire air force, and the U.S. still has ground units in North Africa. But that's all that the Allies really have to take back the rest of North Africa. They have no transports, no units, either from from America or Britain coming down into the Med. So wasn't a great turn for Italy. But they saved most of their money last turn, so they'll be able to build up. They can probably put 3 new fighters on the board this turn, so build that Air Force back up a little bit. And who knows, maybe even sacrifice more of the Air Force to take out these last couple U.S. tanks, maybe. So that was pretty much it in Europe. I'm thinking that the Germans might actually pull these 2 wolf packs off of the convoying and send them here into Sea Zone 80, along with the Stukas and a couple of fighters that can reach from Romania. And we might see the Germans try to take out this entire British fleet here. It'd be about 8, 9 subs, 5 Stukas, and 2 fighters against about 6 destroyers, a battleship, a light carrier with a fighter, 2 light cruisers, and 2 heavy cruisers. So I think the Germans might do that. Completely, if they could, obviously completely take out that British Navy, which would not only give the Italians back the bonus by having the Med free of Allied ships, but would then actually allow the Italians, since there's no Allied ships that would be left in the Med, they could actually start building some ships themselves. They already have sizable infantry forces in northern Italy. They could put a couple of transports down and then start bringing those guys over. And taking some of these territories back that the Americans might take here on this next turn. And yes, the British do have significant air assets, but neither the British nor the Americans hardly have any ground units in Africa. So Italy might take advantage of that if Germany can come down in and take out this entire fleet down here in Sea Zone 80. So we'll see how that goes. In the Pacific, again, it seems like a kind of a disastrous turn for Japan, but again, if we look a little deeper, not as horrible as it first seems. So first down in the South Pacific, the Japanese, with this small fleet down here and a bunch of transports of men, they took British Malaya back. They also took this northern Free French territory, so they went up $3 right there. And they've kind of got a pretty good hold here in Southeast Asia. Communists is trying to make their way down, but the Far East Command is kind of bottled up. Japan mostly has just infantry, but I'm not sure they'll be able to take Calcutta with that. But they at least have got a firm grip on the territories in Southeast Asia as well as the Money Islands. They put down 3 tactical bombers and a sub, a destroyer, and another transport, and then just continue to back away up here. They're losing probably 1 per turn. These original Japanese-held territories here on the border with the Soviet Union, but not a lot the Japanese can do there. The big battle, a huge naval engagement here in Hawaii, and the Japanese lost their entire fleet. It was a huge battle. I kind of figured it wasn't going to go Japan's way when the 2 U.S. coastal subs, which only can hit on a 1 or 2, both hit. One rolled a 1 and one rolled a 2 on the first round of combat, their first strike ability. So kind of figured it was going to be tough for Japan. It was all downhill from there. They lost altogether, I think it was like around 5 heavy battleships, 3 destroyers, 4 light cruisers, a couple heavy cruisers, 3 subs, 2 fleet carriers, 3 light carriers, around 7 fighters, a couple of tacticals. I mean, they lost everything. Now, they did inflict a bunch of damage on the U.S. in return. The U.S. lost a ton of stuff as well. Altogether, probably around 8 light cruisers, about 6 heavy cruisers, 2 fleet carriers, a light carrier. Altogether, probably about 6 or 7 planes, 3 subs. So the U.S. lost a bunch too, and all these battleships that are left, there's 8 left, they're all damaged. So not a one of them hasn't sustained damage. So again, on the surface, it looks like, because obviously Japan lost their entire fleet that went over to Hawaii. But what it did do is it also correspondingly pretty much wiped out almost all the U.S. Even these 8 battleships that are all damaged and survived, they had to pull back to the west coast here because they need a major shipyard to be able to be repaired. And even then, shipyards can only repair 5 points of damage. So it's going to be a while before those 8 battleships are fully operational again. And it did wipe out the U.S. Navy that was threatening from Hawaii to possibly come down in the South Pacific. So now the U.S. pretty much has to rebuild their Navy as well. And again, there's no danger of Japan losing any of the money islands down here in the South Pacific. So it wasn't completely horrible. Japan's going to probably have to pull most of this small fleet back to the Japanese home waters and also spend money on trying to rebuild some kind of fleet. The U.S. did drop 3 fleet carriers this turn. But again, it's going to take a couple turns at least for those battleships to be fully repaired. So not sure how much damage the U.S. can do with just these 3 fleet carriers and 4 destroyers. So kind of a wash. And definitely Japan pushed the U.S. back as far as any kind of invasion in Japan itself. There's no danger of that. So Japan might have bought a little bit of time, even if it took sacrificing that huge fleet they had built up. Plus, who knows, we're about to enter the turn where the game can end early. So we'll see how that goes as well. Right now, I believe the Axis are ahead on points. I'll have to double check, let you guys know for the next turn. But if the game did end now, I believe the Axis have it on points by a little bit. Actually, over the Comintern is in second place. The Far East Command, they did put down a second minor factory so they can put a couple units on the board each turn. That was about it for them. Anzac saved their money and are still sitting in Sydney. But now with that massive Japanese fleet wiped out, they might feel bold enough that they can come on out and probably take some of these vacant islands down here north of Australia. And then the Communist Chinese moved into Rihe. They took that original Japanese territory, and they're starting to move some stuff. They dropped some more men along the coast so that Japan just couldn't land there. And they're trying to maneuver some stuff down here in South China to counter the Japanese landings. So that's where things stand here, heading into turn number 17. This could be the turn where the war ends prematurely. We'll see how that goes and let you know about the action here on turn 17.